Okay, so the topic that I chose was slavery, and I picked the year 1861 because 1864 was the time where slavery was ended by the 13th Amendment. So I thought there would be some tension or some history behind it in the years before it. So I just picked that. And some of the articles I read a total of 4 different articles. The first one that I read was about a name named Richard Bruce, I believe. And this was just about a man who was previously a slave, but he saved up and had enough money to pay for his own freedom. He also paid for the freedom of one of his wives and was hoping to pay for the freedom of one or more of his children. And what's important to note about this article is that the article doesn't necessarily glorify, but it does in a way kind of glorify because the article goes into detail about other successes that he had and ways that he saved money and just how he was unique and successful in what he was able to do. The second article I read was about a man named Anderson. He was also a slave, but he was a fugitive. He escaped heading toward Canada, and on his way he was caught by his master. He was accused of murdering his master and was sent to American authorities for punishment. A lot of anti-slavery groups and movements believe that he was just being accused of murdering him, just to send him back into slavery. Due to a whole bunch of different technicalities, he was released. And this release sparked a lot of joy in Baltimore and a lot of other surrounding cities, especially in the African American community. Another article that I read was about Abraham Lincoln's peace conference and how he was planning on discussing his plans on ending slavery and pushing for the 13th Amendment. And this just also talked about like the effects that it would have on the community, and it kind of talked about Baltimore worrying about surrounding slave states being upset about this, which I think is important to note because Baltimore was kind of isolating itself from these slave states, which is key to keep in mind because this isolation shows that they were not in agreement with these other slaveholding states. And the final article I read was about an abolition meeting that was broken up. The meeting was basically just to talk about ways to end slavery and to protest for African American civil rights. And despite the meeting being broken up, I think it was important to keep in mind that there were these efforts being made for African Americans and their civil rights. So in essence, all of the articles basically just keep the key idea that they're pushing for African American rights, and they're very positive towards, the anti-slavery movement and just making sure that people of color were just treated equally. And this kind of goes against what I used to think because I grew up on the Eastern Shore, and as we all know and learned in lecture, Eastern Shore was a lot different from Western Shore, Maryland, especially towards slavery and just things like that and supporting the Confederacy or not. And I grew up just hearing stories about these like slavery movements and the Confederacy, and I just thought it was really interesting because I never knew that Western Shore, Maryland, and Baltimore and all of those surrounding areas were not on the same agreement as Eastern Shore, Maryland. So that just kind of goes against what I used to believe. And relating all of this to the lecture, I think that these articles show that past day Baltimore was in support of pushing for these anti-slavery movements and for Black civil rights. And we can kind of see that in today's Baltimore with the Freddie Gray cases. We had, despite the rioting and looting, there was a lot of people out there protesting and supporting for these rights, and again, especially against police brutality. So I just think it was important to keep in mind that Baltimore in the past day is kind of a reflection of Baltimore today, and we can see that with the Freddie Gray cases. So yeah, thank you.